A quiet morning at a local coffee shop takes a shocking turn when an off-duty police officer lets his prejudice get the best of him. James Carter, a well-dressed black man, steps inside, just looking to grab his usual cup of coffee before heading to work. But before he can even place his order, he catches the officer's harsh glare. Suspicion. Judgment. The officer watches him like he doesn't belong. Without warning, the officer steps in, accusing James of loitering, demanding he leave. James, calm but firm, tries to de-escalate, but the officer isn't listening. Then, in a moment of pure rage, the officer does the unthinkable. He throws scalding hot coffee straight at James' face. Gasps fill the room. But what the officer doesn't know, James isn't just any man. He's a high-ranking FBI agent, and now everything is about to change. The entire cafe falls silent as the steaming coffee drips from James' face onto his crisp suit. A sharp sting burns his skin, but he doesn't flinch. The officer, still fuming, smirks as if he's put James in his place. But James just stands there, his jaw tightening, not in anger, but in control. He reaches into his pocket, not for a weapon, not for his phone, but for his badge. The golden FBI credentials gleam under the cafe lights. The officer's face drains of color. The room, once buzzing with whispers, now feels frozen in time. A few customers slowly back away, realizing they just witnessed something much bigger than a coffee shop dispute. James doesn't speak right away. He just watches the officer, his expression unreadable. Then, in a calm but commanding voice, he finally breaks the silence. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." The officer stares at the badge, his hands twitching slightly. He was so sure of himself just moments ago, but now panic flickers in his eyes. The cafe's manager steps forward, nervously glancing between the two men. Customers are still frozen in place, watching, waiting. No one dares to speak. James takes a slow breath, wiping the coffee from his face with a napkin. His voice stays controlled, but there's an undeniable weight behind his words. "What's your name, officer?" The man hesitates, then mutters, "Collins." His badge is visible now, pinned to his belt, though it suddenly feels much heavier. A woman near the counter, who had been recording the whole time, tightens her grip on her phone. Her hands are shaking. She knows this could go viral. James notices but says nothing. Instead, he looks back at Collins. "You targeted me. You assumed something about me. Now, tell me why." Collins swallows hard, his authority slipping away. Collins shifts uncomfortably, his jaw clenched. He opens his mouth to speak but hesitates. Beads of sweat form on his forehead. He thought he had control, but now, standing under the weight of James' steady gaze, he feels exposed. The cafe's silence is crushing, every second stretching unbearably. The woman recording inches closer, her phone still aimed at them. Other customers do the same, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. This isn't just about spilled coffee anymore. This is bigger. James knows it, Collins knows it, and now everyone in the room does too. James steps forward, just enough to make Collins instinctively shift back. "You still haven't answered my question," James says, his voice even but firm. Collins glances around, as if looking for an escape, but there isn't one. Then, the chime of the door. Another officer steps in, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. He locks eyes with Collins, and in that moment, Collins knows his problems have only just begun. The moment the second officer steps inside, the energy in the room shifts. He walks with purpose, his eyes flicking between James and Collins, taking in the scene. The spilled coffee, the stunned customers, the phone cameras still rolling. Collins looks to him, desperate for backup, but the officer's face remains unreadable. Then something unexpected happens. The officer doesn't acknowledge Collins first. He turns to James. "Agent Carter," he says, his voice calm but firm. "Are you all right?" The air in the room thickens. Collins' eyes widen. He wasn't just dealing with an FBI agent. He was dealing with someone well-known, someone respected. James doesn't answer right away. He watches Collins, his expression unreadable. Then he finally speaks. "I'll be fine." But he won't be. Collins stiffens. The second officer exhales, shaking his head. "Collins, you've really done it this time." A flicker of realization crosses Collins' face. He knows now. This isn't just about his badge anymore. This is about his entire career, his reputation, his future. And James, he's not just here to let it slide. Collins' breath turns shallow. The walls feel like they're closing in, and for the first time he realizes there's no talking his way out of this. The second officer steps closer, lowering his voice. "We need to take this outside." But James doesn't move. He simply watches, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Then, another unexpected twist. The cafe manager clears his throat. "Actually," he says hesitantly, "we've got security cameras." Collins freezes. His last hope of spinning the story shatters. The footage will show everything: the coffee, the aggression, the truth. James tilts his head, waiting for a response, but Collins has none. The second officer sighs, then reaches for his radio. "Dispatch, I need a supervisor on site." Collins' face drains of color. He isn't the one in control anymore. As the door swings open and more officers arrive, James steps forward, lowering his voice. "Next time," he says, "judge a man by his character, not by your assumptions." Collins looks away, but it's too late. His career is over. As Collins is led outside, the tension in the cafe finally eases. The customers, who had been holding their breath, exchange quiet glances. Some shake their heads in disbelief, others murmur about what just happened. The woman who recorded the incident looks at James, as if waiting for him to say something. But he doesn't. He simply straightens his suit, wipes the last trace of coffee from his sleeve, and exhales. The second officer turns to James. "Do you want to press charges?" James studies him for a moment, then shakes his head. "The footage will speak for itself," he says. "Let the system handle it." The officer nods, understanding. As James walks toward the door, he pauses, glancing back at the cafe. Today could have gone differently. But he knows one thing for sure: respect and accountability matter. Without another word, he steps outside, leaving the past behind.